It's that time again, test taking time, where we do a test together interactively under timed conditions. Today I thought I'd do a verbal reasoning section, again from this McGraw-Hill test, which is free, available online, link in the description. Now, what you can see on screen is obviously the fact that I took one of the quant sections. That was my last video. It says 85%, but it didn't allow me to click all of the answers. So I think I got 100% on that one. I think one of the questions had a mistake. Either way, we're now going to do verbal reasoning. And even if one out of these 20 questions isn't quite perfectly worded or in the right order or has a mistake and I disagree with it, at least 18, 19 of these questions are going to be just like the ones you see in the real test. So it's still well worth doing together, especially because it's nice of them to provide it for free. As I said, I'm not perfect, so I might make a mistake too, and you can judge me for that. You're basically going to get a chance to see me employ the techniques that I talk about in all my verbal videos. So if I get 0 out of 20, you can just unsubscribe and say his techniques are rubbish. Anyway, let's do section 1 here. And probably my next video will be the other quant section. Section 1, verbal reasoning. We should have 30 minutes for this. Obviously, I might do it a bit quicker than that, we'll see. In prioritizing efficiency, modern society downplays something in favor of an all-consuming something. So they're prioritizing efficiency. Modern society is downplaying art, idealism, ambition. Idealism is like kind of the opposite of efficiency. It's like creative. I'm teaching here. I should probably just focus on the time. But yeah, I think that's the biggest contrast with efficiency. In favor of an all-consuming pragmatism. Because pragmatism is like efficiency. Adamancy is determination. Putrefaction or putrefaction is like wasting away, being diseased. I should not teach as much, but I can't help it. Despite the something of evidence supporting his theory, Wasserman used his charisma to attract a legion of followers. So despite something bad about the evidence, he still managed to attract a legion of followers. The dearth, the lack of evidence supporting his theory, he used his charisma to attract a legion of followers, yeah. Okay, next one. A trademark characteristic of postmodernism is the turn from self-seriousness to flippancy or playing around. What would that be? I'm not sure actually. Turn from self-seriousness to being serious to, could be B or C, I think. We're going to find out after the colon. Because everything has been explained and already done, the only remaining recourse is cautious investigation. So none of these go with sentimentality, I think. Because sentimentality is like being emotional. So I think irony makes sense because it's kind of like amused detachment. You go from seriousness to irony because everything's already been explained. The only thing we can do now is just be amused and detached. Heightened awareness wouldn't fit with sentimentality. Cautious investigation wouldn't fit. So that's the only pair that makes sense. Even though it could have been sentimentality, it's the only pair that makes sense, I think. If I run out of time, I'm going to blame my teaching. Humour is a central component of her plays, not a peripheral one, not a superficial one. This fact, however, has been lost on critics. Which fact? The fact that humour is central, okay. Has been lost on critics who interpret her attempts. I need to understand this. Humour is central, not superficial. The fact that she's humorous, however, has been lost on critics who interpret her attempts at comedy as either incidental, like not intentional, or even when it's intended, yeah, the opposite of being intended is being incidental. Or even when it's intended as, what's the third blank here? Does it let me, okay. As one of these three. Eliciting mild laughter outside of the scope of what the player is attempting to accomplish. as irrelevant, eliciting mild laughter, outside of the scope of what the play is attempting to accomplish. So I think irrelevant fits best with outside of the scope of what the play is attempting to accomplish. Detrimental is a bad thing, but they don't say it's a bad thing, they just say it's outside the scope. And derivative means unoriginal, but they don't say unoriginal, they just say outside the scope. So I think irrelevant is good here. Let me just double check. Yeah, not overrated, not sophomoric. I think that means sending you to sleep. Maybe that's soporific, I don't know. Derivative, yeah, I'm happy with my answer there. To state that the writer is a something is to fundamentally misunderstand his main themes. Though wariness of human motives does characterize his writings. What's wariness of human motives? Being a misanthrope. But to state that he's a misanthrope is to misunderstand him. So they're about to say he's not really a misanthrope. This something is explored within a context. This belligerent cynicism. Wariness is closest to cynicism rather than belligerence, which is aggression. This cynicism is explored within a context that repeatedly emphasizes the human capacity for and tendency toward goodness. Right? Because remember, we're saying this guy's not a misanthrope. To state that the writer is a misanthrope is to misunderstand what's going on. So the author believes this person's cool, not a misanthrope, which means someone who hates humans. So it's explored within a context that repeatedly emphasizes the human capacity for and tendency toward benevolence, goodness. This writer actually believes humans can be good. Quite happy with that, so I'd move on. The something of medieval thinkers to explain the workings of the universe. Inability? Yeah, inability, I guessed it. The inability of these thinkers to explain the workings of the universe has led some critics to question the something of human rationality. The effectiveness? Wait, the ambiguity of medieval thinkers. No, that's being in two minds. That doesn't make sense. The meaning of medieval thinkers? No. So definitely inability. The inability of medieval thinkers to explain the workings of the universe has led some critics to question the legitimacy? Nuances. It wouldn't be nuances, the subtleties. Legitimacy seems a bit too harsh, like you're questioning all of rationality. Whereas effectiveness is like, yeah, it can work sometimes, there's some sense there, but is it really effective? Because they weren't able to explain the workings of the universe. Okay, I'm happy with that. It can't be the others. I'm not really super comfortable with my answer, it's just the others are pretty crap. So, next one. Remember, on the easier questions, we want to save time, so we've got more time for the harder questions. On a certain examination, more students in Class A scored above 80% than did the students in any other class. Nice. On the same examination, more students in Class B scored above 90% than did the students in any other class. So that means there were loads of people in Class A. Let's make some deductions before we even look at the answers. There must have been loads of people in Class A who scored between 80 and 90%, right? Because they had the record for scoring above 80%, but B had the record for scoring above 90%. So that means that loads of the Class A people who scored above 80% must have been between 80 and 90. Otherwise, they'd have had the record for 90% as well. Okay, I predict that's probably where they're going to go, but let's find out. Students in Class B had a higher average score on the examination. We don't know that. No, we don't know that. We can't talk about the entire class. No, because we don't know about those students who didn't score above 90%, for example. They could have all got 1% in Class B. Here we go. Just exactly what I was saying. More students in Class A scored between 80 and 90% than in Class B. That makes perfect mathematical sense, just what I was saying earlier. And this is the value of predicting the answer. You can find an answer pretty quickly and then just get it right. Just quickly. I would just move on in the real test, but I think I'll just look at these for fun. Definitely not C, definitely not D, definitely not E. Okay, cool. Now, Time for a reading comp passage. The features that ultimately came to characterize Hawaiian-style building, which also included breezy linnae, generous overhanging eaves, and textured exterior surfaces, came about as the hold of the Big Five weakened. What the hell? The Pan-Pacific movement was gaining sway. Okay, so these architectural features came about because the Big Five, whatever that is, weakened. The Pan-Pacific movement, which presumably brought about these architectural stuff, was gaining sway, and the polyglot population began finding its many voices and architectural idioms. Okay, so Pan-Pacific is this new stuff, and the Big Five was the old stuff. Churches responded to the one blood sentiment of many of their parishioners by constructing veranda-like linnae on either side of the naves that symbolically welcomed all believers. Nice. Architects of the time in general often blended Eastern and Western styles, ushering in a pagoda, for example, to sit in for a bell tower in the task of calling the congregation to service. Nice. For a long time, Hawaiian-style building seemed to have little to do with the architectural tastes the island's original settlers brought with them from the Marquesas Islands more than 800 years ago. That's confusing. So it had little to do with the tastes of the original settlers. Okay, yeah, because they're bringing in styles from all across the world. For example, the highly specialized skill needed to tightly weave the thatch that made their structures waterproof began disappearing in the 18th century. Oh no, when the population declined by 90%, the result of diseases imported from Europeans. So their original style was dying away, and they started to blend in Eastern Western styles. Evolving innovations such as hipped roofs and airy linnae, I still don't know what that word means, but anyway, had begun to make their appearance in 18th century Hawaii. Okay, just as the traditions that made them possible were being obliterated. It took longer than a century for some of the most fundamental aspects of Hawaiian architecture to find their way home again. So the author's kind of maybe a little bit sad that that original Hawaiian architecture went away in favour of this blend of stuff. Trying to see back to that original sentence. The features that ultimately came to characterise Hawaiian-style building came about as a whole of the Big Five weakened. They still don't really talk about the Big Five. Pan-Pacific movement. Okay, so the Pan-Pacific movement is like East and West and bring in everything and everyone. And the author's a little bit sad that that original style of Hawaiian architecture went away. You might think I've invested quite a lot of time in reading that, but now we should get the answers relatively more quickly. In the context of the passage, idioms most nearly means. Well, I know what idiom means, but here we go, architectural idioms. Just unique aspects, basically. Styles? Not believers, not voices. Began finding as many voices and architectural idioms. Just like unique quirks. Architectural idioms. Well, they talk about the styles of architecture, right? Yeah. Blended Eastern and Western styles. So these are architectural styles when they say architectural idioms. Edifices and constructions are buildings. We're talking more about their styles. So I'm pretty confident in C. According to the passage, why did churches begin constructing veranda-like linnae on either side of the naves that symbolically welcomed all believers? Because they were moving away from the old style, original Hawaiian style, into the new Pan-Pacific, welcoming everybody, basically. To reflect the styles of other buildings constructed during the era. Why do they say that, actually? Sorry. Churches responded to the one blood sentiment by constructing a veranda-like. So it tells us directly they were responding to the one blood sentiment. Not wealth. Yeah, to reflect a belief. They said it directly. To appease members. Appease is a bit harsh. Appease is a negative word. You could say, I think reflect a belief is more neutral than to appease members. They're just responding. Yeah, normally I don't really have to look back at the passage, but this is quite a hard, confusing one. So many different nouns in here and weird stuff that they're talking about. Okay, I think it's that. Yeah, I think it's C. We'll find out. They might say D, but I wouldn't agree with that. Okay. Although, is it a belief? Is it a belief? Or is the warm blood sentiment? Is that a belief? Ouch. Is that a belief though? Which one's the warm blood sentiment? It's more of a sentiment, really. I think that could be wrong because they could be saying, oh, it's some sort of Christian belief to do this. No, it's not a belief. It's because it's pan-Pacific. It's like a sentiment, a feeling they have. So even though it's got that word appease, I think it's not really a belief, I don't think. Anyway, I don't want to spend too long, but okay, so I'm going to go for D despite the word appease because I don't like belief. Okay, select the sentence in the passage that introduces an ironic aspect of the evolution of Hawaiian architecture. I even remember that. It was somewhere towards the end and they talked about just when it was gaining, just when these new techniques were coming in, they forgot the origins or something like that. Yeah, here we go. Innovations begun to make their appearance just as the traditions that made them possible were being obliterated. That's ironic. See, when you read the passage really thoroughly, you get these really hard questions pretty much instantly. Okay, next one. Hope that was right. It'd be funny if it wasn't. This is sentence equivalence. Though the occupational landscape of the city has generally been thought of as industrial, the diversity of the citizens' jobs something undermines this categorization. Because it's that word though at the beginning. Though people thought of it as industrial, the diversity undermines. That was my prediction, and that's actually the first word. I swear I haven't seen these before. Which other word means undermines? Sub is under. That's a big clue. Subvert is just like to undermine. Diminish is different. Diminish is like bring it down, whereas undermine is just weaken it. This is a tough one. I know many of you might have picked diminish, but no, I think it's subvert. With so many divergent opinions in the field, it was unreasonable for the scientist to expect that his theory, however sound, would not encounter resistance, opposing views. Resistance, just what he predicted. Resistance. Resentment is different from resistance. Criticism. Yeah, criticism is like resisting it. Because so many divergent opinions, different from his own. So they would resist, they would criticize. None of the others make sense. The only closest one is resentment, but that's too harsh. That's like hating the person. Yeah. Okay. With the proliferation of the internet has come something people's attention spans. An attenuation in, a weakening of. That's the most obvious one. Unless users receive immediate stimulation from what is in front of them, they will quickly seek novelty on another page or website. There's no other blank. What am I supposed to pick? Let me expand this window. There's literally no other blank. Oh, this is sentence equivalence, but they've written the question in a weird way. Okay, sorry about that. So it's just sentence equivalence, a decrease in. Yeah, a decrease in people's attention spans, an attenuation in, a weakening of. Yeah, okay, cool. That was weird. Again, sentence equivalence, but why did they not do it like this the last time? It's confusing. Despite most people's professed something psychotherapy, people are seeking the help of these professionals in record numbers. So people must have professed or stated aversion, like hate towards or dislike towards psychotherapy, but in reality, people are seeking the help of these professionals in record numbers. Again, my prediction, aversion was there, despite most people's professed antagonism towards. Aversion, not ignorance, that's not harsh enough. Skepticism. So they say that they're skeptical. They say that they have an aversion towards it, but actually people are doing it in record numbers. Okay, the last of the big RCs. Let's do this. The idea to use Navajo for secure communications came from Philip Johnson, the son of a missionary to the Navajos, and one of the few non-Navajos who spoke their language fluently. Nice idea. Reared on the Navajo reservation, Johnson was a World War I veteran who knew of the military search for a code that would withstand all attempts to decipher it. He also knew that Native American languages, notably Choctaw, had been used in World War I to encode messages. Johnson believed Navajo answered the military requirement for an undecipherable code because it is an unwritten language of extreme complexity. Obviously, I'm reading this a bit quicker because the content is a bit easier, less foreign nouns. Its syntax and tonal qualities, not to mention dialects, make it unintelligible to anyone without extensive exposure and training. You can imagine like the Nazis trying to work out what they're talking about. It has no alphabet or symbols and is spoken only on the Navajo lands of the American Southwest. One estimate indicates that fewer than 30 non-Navajos, none of them Japanese, could understand the language at the outbreak of World War II. Early in 1942, Johnson met with Major General Vogel, the commanding general of Amphibious Corps, Pacific Fleet, and his staff to convince them of the Navajo's language value as code. Johnson staged tests under simulated combat conditions, demonstrating that Navajos could encode, transmit, and decode a 3-line English message in 20 seconds. Nice. Machines of the time required 30 minutes to perform the same job. Convinced, Vogel recommended to the commandant of the Marine Corps that Marines recruit 200 Navajos. Cool story. I like it. The author most likely mentions the fact that Navajo had no alphabet or symbols in order to, let's predict the answer, demonstrate how hard it is to break, like how little understood it is. There you go. To emphasize how difficult it is to decipher. How can you decipher it? It's not even written down. Not a drawback. This author loves the idea. Actually, let's quickly go back to, it has no alphabet or symbols and is spoken only on Navajo lands. Well, let's read the sentence before, sentence after. Its syntax and tonal qualities, not to mention dialects, make it unintelligible to anyone without extensive exposure and training. One estimate indicates. It does come straight before a sentence that says that's kind of why 30 non-Navajos only could speak it, could understand it. There's no alphabet or symbols. Although this is in the context of a paragraph talking about answered the military requirement for an undecipherable code because it is an unwritten language. So it's definitely A, actually. The reason the author is bringing this up is to say, look, you guys will never be able to decipher this. And it's just one reason among many that you can't decipher it because it doesn't have an alphabet. That's not the only reason. There's loads of other reasons, syntax, all the rest of it. But that's one of the reasons. So I'm confident with A. I wouldn't even look at the others. The passage is primarily concerned with, so we're looking for a vague general answer covering everything. It's not all about the complexity of the language. Profiling someone's search, yes, because Johnson is everywhere, so it's okay to include him for a solution to a problem. Look how general that answer is. The solution to the problem of finding a code. I like that. Analysing the benefits and drawbacks, there was no drawbacks. Explaining why a certain strategy was adopted. That's pretty vague. Explaining why a certain strategy was adopted. It just doesn't mention Johnson, and Johnson's forever in this passage. First, second, and third paragraph. So I like B better. Dissecting the origins, no. Okay. Select the sentence in second or third paragraph of the passage, in the second or third, that provides empirical evidence in favour of using Navajo for secure communications. Empirical. So, is it this one? Is that empirical? Empirical is more numbers. That's empirical, right? Fewer than 30 non-Navajos could understand the language. Yeah, it's that one. I mean, this is also, because you're staging tests, that's an estimate. Whereas this is actually more evidence, you could say. Stage tests under simulated conditions. Sounds more like empirical science, right, doesn't it? Demonstrate that they could do it in 3 lines, that's a number, in 20 seconds, that's a number. This is a slightly weird question, I'll be honest, because I think this other sentence is also kind of empirical. I mean, it's an estimate though, which is maybe a slight drawback. So maybe actually this one, empirical evidence. Empirical is like with experiments. So I think this one, like how can that not be the answer? Like what's wrong with that? That is Navajo, that is secure. Code, transmit, decode. Yeah, I'd be pretty stunned if that's wrong. It could be the other one, but what this one? That's evidence. This is a weird question, I'll be honest. That's a weird question. There's quite a few sentences that's empirical evidence as well, though, isn't it? Machines at the time required 30 minutes. In favour of using, and then we're comparing it to the Navajo, we could do it in 20 seconds. So I like this one just because it's got the test thing, but I'm not fully convinced. Studies show that an individual suffering from insomnia is more likely to be a smoker than is a non-insomniac. Clearly, lack of sleep induces insomniacs to smoke. Classic A causes B. Insomnia causes smoking, whereas the weakness there is that maybe smoking causes insomnia. So to weaken the argument, we'd look for one of these to say smoking causes insomnia. Yeah. Many of smoking's effects are associated with insomnia. Nicotine is known to have relaxing. The problem with A is relaxing isn't the same as not sleeping, whereas D is more direct. Associated. Most insomniacs, I don't like the word many here though. Most insomniacs developing a smoking addiction after having developed sleep problems. But that would reinforce that sleep induces insomniacs to smoke. That strengthens it. I don't like A, don't like that. Don't like B. Many insomniacs whose sleep patterns return to normal reported quitting smoking. But again, that suggests sleep causes smoking or sleep causes not smoking, whereas we want smoking causes insomnia. So I think D is correct, but it's a weak answer. It's a badly written answer, I think. Uh-oh. Got to do 2 questions in 2 minutes. Got to be fast now. Islam, in part because of the ban on figural representation, has contributed certain characteristics to art that have been since the 7th century. Artists have to rely on motifs, calligraphy, and patterns. These scientists discovered that artists as far back as the 15th century were using the concept of geometry, shapes, without repetition, polygons and mathematical principles. Math precedes the shape. They made tilings that reflect mathematics that were so sophisticated that we didn't figure out until 20 or 30 years later. According to the passage, why do Islamic artists have to rely on vegetal motifs? Because the ban on figural representation. Yes. Which of the passages could most properly be inferred from the passage? Which of the following? Islamic art was the first to use mathematical principles. I don't think it said that. Prior to the 7th century, there was no recorded geometrical patterns or ornamentation on art. The math in Islamic art is incomprehensible to modern scholars. No, because they figured it out 20 or 30 years recently. Were there no ban, we don't know that they might still have used these principles. Crap, I don't know which one it is. Early Islamic artists were not aware of the relationship between art and mathematics. I actually don't know the answer here. Maybe this one. Maybe this one, I have to guess. I have run out of time. That's unfortunate. Obviously, because I was teaching, I did have a bit less time than I would normally have. But still, with that last question, I'm not convinced any of them were that good. But obviously I had to guess that one, so likely I've got it wrong, but I didn't really see any answer that leapt out there. I kind of had enough time to spot a good answer, and I didn't see any good answers. But yes, of course, if I'd had the extra 5 minutes from teaching, maybe I would have got that. But anyway, I think that was a better test. Still not perfect though in the layout. Like some of those sentence equivalence questions, it's like not laid out in a proper way. But as ever, I hope you've learned something from it. Please do leave a like and a comment if you have learned anything from this. And I'm not going to go through every explanation. I'll just let you see them on the screen. That one was correct. That one was correct. You can pause it, obviously, if you want to go into more detail. That was quite hard, but that was correct. That was correct. Not too hard. That was correct. Not too hard. That was correct. It's kind of like a weird one, but it's correct. That was correct. Predict the answer before you look at the answer choices. That was correct. Hard, though. Ooh, it was to reflect a belief. Which is obviously what I originally picked. And they're going to say D is wrong because a sentiment is not a belief. A sentiment is a feeling. Oh, I don't like that. They never implied that the one blood sentiment was a belief, like a faith thing that you have. Obviously, I didn't like D because the word appease. But it did directly link to Pan-Pacific, which is what the sentence said. That's a really tough one. Like, they both had bad aspects. Like, D had the word appease, whereas C had the word belief, none of which were accurate. So it's just a toss-up between those two. So I don't mind, really, that they say I got that wrong. Obviously, you could say I'm being self-justifying, but they don't really explain why the others are wrong. So they're not really explaining why D is wrong here. I think they're both decent answers, but each of them has one flaw, and I couldn't decide which flaw was worse. So I'm not too worried about that. I would just say that with the being lucky enough to get the perfect score in the GRE and GMAT for the verbal, I know what the real test is like, and the real test doesn't have as ambiguous answers as these. Like, most of these questions are great, but a bit too many of them are ambiguous. Okay, that was fine. That was fine. Subverts, not diminishes. Etymology helped me out there. That was fine. That was fine, although it was organised in a weird way, right? So wasted my time a bit. That was fine. Good vocab in here. That was fine. That was a good one. That was a genuinely good question that tests whether students know the real reason why this is being written. Oh, man. That's this I'm actually shocked at. Explaining why a strategy was adopted. I mean, yes, that's true. But then in the answer they say the purpose of the passage is to explain why Johnson recommended. But then your answer doesn't include Johnson at all. Explaining why a certain strategy was adopted. Profiling someone's search for a solution. But he wasn't searching for the solution, was he? He already had the solution. Okay, maybe I have to admit I got this wrong. Yeah, I can't say that this is just an error because he wasn't searching for the solution. He already knew the solution. So even though I like the use of Johnson because we're profiling someone, it wasn't about his search for the solution. He was just describing how good the solution was. Damn it, yeah, I deserve to get this wrong. Whereas D is even vaguer. I even said when I was doing this, look for a vague answer. And it talked about explaining why a certain strategy, so vague, was adopted. The strategy being to use Navajo. Okay, yeah, that I genuinely got wrong. Okay, I can hold my hands up there. Hope you guys learned from that. D was even vaguer, and B was wrong because it wasn't about search. Probably got more wrong. What? Oh, this one. This is the one I complained about. The only sentence mentioning a study conducted to demonstrate the benefits. What? Oh, did I accidentally click? Sentence 4. Which one is that? Are they saying the correct answer is? Because my one has a study. They're saying it's this one, aren't they? Believe Navajo answered the military requirement for an undecipherable code. It's unwritten language of extreme complexity. That's a belief. Are they kidding? I think they mean my answer is correct. It's in red. This is the only sentence mentioning a study conducted. That's what my one does. To demonstrate the benefits. That's what my one does. This one, believed answered the military requirement for an undecipherable code because it's an unwritten language of extreme complexity. There's no study there. I think they meant to say this one was correct because that's empirical evidence. Okay, I don't know. They're going to say it's wrong, I think, but that doesn't make any. Their explanation matches my answer, not their answer. Okay, that was good because I would go over this one. It's not a perfect answer because it's got the word many, which is not tight enough, really. And also it's associated with insomnia, whereas would have preferred to say something like cause insomnia, are known to contribute to insomnia. That would be much stronger. So it was a weak answer, but it was the only one that suggested smoking causes insomnia, which is the best way to weaken the argument that insomnia causes smoking. So that was a classic A causes B, but the actual answer is B causes A question. I've done videos on that for my critical reasoning playlist. I don't know if I have a playlist yet, but I'm going to need to make a playlist. But I've done several critical reasoning videos on that. This one, yes, that was fine. And this one I had to guess because I ran out of time. Prior to the 7th century, there were no recorded geometric patterns. Where did it say that? Has contributed certain characteristics to art that have been seen since the 7th century. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, okay. B could be good if I'd had a bit more time. Yeah, I can't really complain with that answer. It's a good answer. I just didn't have the time to do it. Okay, so that was fun. I think that I could have performed better, but it doesn't really matter. It's all about you learning, you seeing my pacing, which obviously could have been a bit faster without the teaching, you seeing how I handle CR questions in terms of predicting an answer, and RC questions in terms of engaging with the text and taking my time. And overall, if you take out the answer that doesn't make any sense, 18 out of 20 is not too bad. You can afford to get one wrong in the verbal and still get a 170. And I think one wrong, even though I got two wrong here, but one wrong in the real test is probably what caused me to get the 170. So overall, not too bad. Really hope you learned something and see you in the next one.